The wrestling body chief is accused of mismanagement, dictatorial handling, mental and even sexual exploitation of the female athletes. Now, this has been a never-before-seen revolt by Indian athletes. The only other time something like this has happened was back in 2010, when hockey players revolted against the then federation because of non-payment of their dues. You know what is different about this revolt though? It is coming from a sport that is actually doing well. Wrestling has won a medal for India in the Olympics since 2008 in every edition till 2020 and countless other events. Unlike hockey, which was at its nadir post the hockey team failed to even qualify for the Olympics in 2008. So there is pressure mounting on the BJP MP who heads the federation, but he seems to be defiant. Meanwhile, the federation has called a special general meeting to discuss the issue, but they are unlikely to push Sharan to quit. The wrestlers also met with the sports secretary today to air their grievances. The sports ministry has already issued a deadline of 72 hours to the federation to respond to the charges. Vinesh, Sakshi and Bajrang and others meanwhile made it clear they will not quit their stir till the president goes. But they also want a complete overhaul of the way wrestling is run in India. On the serious charges of sexual abuse, the players said a few women will go and file a police complaint soon. What will happen next is the big question. Will Brij Bhushan resign himself? Will he be given an ultimatum of sorts by the sports ministry? Can the federation take a call and come together against a strongman like him? Is the situation black and white or are there shades of grey? We'll take all of those questions to our guests in just a bit. First, let me reiterate the demands that have been made by the players, and this has also come after they have met with the sports secretary today. So demand number one, removal of the president, Brij Bhushan Sharan. This is of course an absolute a deal breaker if this doesn't happen. But they're also saying that wrestlers have to be treated better and that there should be action against the sexual exploitation complaint that they have aired, although there isn't an official complaint yet. And a new federation should be set up for wrestlers. So they're demanding a complete overhaul. Let me break down the extent of the charges that have been made by the athletes, that was yesterday and today, and the response that we've got from the wrestling chief so far. So the players' charge is that Brij Bhushan has harassed sportswomen and coaches, and that male coaches also harass other athletes and female coaches at their camps. What was the response of the WFI chief? That he'll hang himself if even one allegation against him is true. He also added that there isn't a single official complaint against me. Let's see if that changes by tomorrow. The players have also said that the federation is being run in an arbitrary manner. The rules are not player friendly. They change rules and, insist that the players abide by them. The chief is saying that why didn't they have problems for the past 10 years? Why are they raising this only now? Players have said that female wrestlers have also received death threats from WFI officials, that they almost, keep a very hawk-like eye even on their personal lives. The WFI chief has said that these wrestlers are bitter. This particular set of wrestlers are bitter. They're angry because they haven't been able to perform and they cannot perform anymore. Finally, the players have said that Brij Bhushan is running a federation in a dictatorial manner, which the chief just responded by saying that all of this is a conspiracy and that a big businessman is behind it. Now, the WFI chief didn't just stop at defending himself. He's also made counter charges against the players, the set protesting against him. What are those charges? Let's take a look. He is saying that there are a few set of players who don't want to give trials for big events like every other player has to. These players are also refusing to participate in national events. Vinesh, for example, wanted to change the chief coach, but you cannot change the coach only by one person's recommendation. And he's also gone on to allege that some players have formed a local federation of sorts and they want to pick and choose which players go for national events. So he's basically suggesting that there's a lobby that is trying to dictate terms because they're all well established and actually top achievers of their sport. In fact, listen in to some of the charges that have been made by the players and what the WFI chief said on their conduct.
ओलंपिक के बाद से लगातार मैंने नेशनल खेला है और ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं टूर्नामेंट से भागी हूँ, कोई भी नहीं भागता, इवन विनेश भी नहीं भागती। एक नेशनल के लिए रिक्वेस्ट की थी कि कैंप में नाम डाल दो, क्योंकि कई बार साल थोड़ा एक्टिव हो गया, थोड़ा इंजरी है, तो एक रिक्वेस्ट थी। आप बोल रहे नहीं सुनते, कैंप में नाम नहीं है अभी तक। सोनम का नहीं है, अंशु का नहीं है, ये फ्यूचर है, मेरा नहीं है, मैं भी खेलना चाहती हूँ अभी।
जो राज्य के खिलाड़ी हैं, मैं ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि ना आप नेशनल लड़ोगे, ना आप ओपन नेशनल लड़ोगे, ना आप ट्रायल दोगे। ट्रायल भी आप चाहते हैं कि सारे खिलाड़ियों का ट्रायल हो जाए, फिर जो खिलाड़ी उसमें जीतता हो उससे आपका अकेले ट्रायल हो जाए।
The larger question we're asking today is, while we look at exactly what both sides are saying, as far as this matter is concerned and the charges against him are concerned, should Brij Bhushan not resign? That's the larger fundamental question today.
अगर हमें मजबूर किया गया तो हम कल एफआईआर भी दर्ज करवाएंगे, हम केस भी लड़ेंगे, लेकिन उसमें हिंदुस्तान के हजारों लड़कियों का, हजारों लड़कों का रेसलिंग का करियर खत्म होने की कगार पे हो जाएगा।
चाहते कि हमारे ऊपर कोई कल किसी का भी, आप लोगों में से किसी का बच्चा रेसलिंग में आए तो वो किसी दबाव में प्रैक्टिस करे, क्योंकि अपना जो जीवन है, अपनी जो ट्रेनिंग है वो कर सके।
इन लोगों से ये चाहते हैं, उनके समक्ष भी बात रखूंगी, चाहे वो प्रधानमंत्री जी हो। हमारी सरकार ने अब तक, आप लोगों ने देखा होगा कि उनको बेहतर घंटे का टाइम भी दे दिया है जवाब देने के लिए। कुछ भी होने से पहले एक खिलाड़ी, आज मैं कोशिश करूंगी कि इनकी समस्या का मैं समाधान जरूर निकलवा दूं।
First up, I want to go across to Mahavir Singh Phogat, former wrestler and Olympic coach, joining us on the show. He, of course, is the father of the Phogat sisters, uncle of Vinesh. सबसे पहले फोगट जी मुझे ये बताइए कि आपको लगता है कि ये जो रिवोल्ट लड़कियों ने किया स्पेशली, उसकी क्या वजह थी? ऐसी क्या नौबत आई जो आपको लगता है कि उन्होंने ये रिवोल्ट किया है?
जब कोई भी जो बात सुनता नहीं प्लेयर की है, अब मनमर्जी करता है, ये लड़कियों को जो टारगेट रखता है, इनकी गलत नजर रहती है, तो इससे जो परेशान है, धमकी देता है यो।
धमकी देते हैं। एक सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट आपने बोला, गलत नजर रखते हैं लड़कियों पे, इसका इल्जाम भी ओपनली लगाया है विनेश और बाकी खिलाड़ियों ने। तो आपको क्या लगता है कि ये लड़कियां सामने आएंगी?
देखिए, आप खुद लड़की हैं, क्या लड़की इतनी हिम्मत होती है कि हमें झूठा लगा दे, आरोप लगा दे? वो लड़कियां यहाँ हाजिर हैं, यहाँ बैठी हैं धरने पर, जिन लड़कियां जो हैं वो प्रूफ है उनके पास, कोई चाहेगा तो मिलेगा।
ब्रिज भूषण ये कह रहे हैं कि ये सारी एक हरियाणा की लॉबी है जो ये सारा रिवोल्ट कर रही है, कोई अदर स्टेट प्रोटेस्ट नहीं कर रहा, सिर्फ ये हरियाणा के बच्चे हैं जो कर रहे हैं।
बिल्कुल, इन्हें जो 2003 से मैं जुड़ा हूँ फेडरेशन से, और जो कैंपों से आज तक, यहाँ जो 2003 में जो वो था मलिक साहब थे जो फेडरेशन अध्यक्ष थे, कोई चर्चा में नहीं आए ने। उसके बाद पंजाब का जो मुंडेर था, कोई चर्चा में नहीं आया। या क्या हुआ, ब्रिज भूषण आने के बाद 2 साल बाद में चर्चा में आ गए, या क्या हुआ, तो 10-12 साल कोई आया नहीं चर्चा में।
वो ये भी कह रहे हैं कि जो थोड़े एस्टैब्लिश स्टार्स हैं, विनेश, साक्षी वगैरह, वो ट्रायल नहीं देना चाहते, वो नेशनल्स नहीं खेलना चाहते। इनफैक्ट विनेश ने तो आज खुले में बोला वहाँ प्रोटेस्ट साइट में कि वो सीधा ओलंपिक्स खेलेंगे। क्या ये कहना भी सही है? क्या ये डिमांड भी सही है?
देखिए, जो इनकी ये थी, जो प्लेयर जो नेशनल में जो बाहर जो मेडल ले रहा है, जो कर रहा है, तो उसकी कोई नेशनल ट्रायल नहीं लिया करते। सिर्फ उसकी ट्रायल जो कैंप में होती, जो टीम बाहर जाती, उसकी ट्रायल जब होती थी, नेशनल नहीं खिलाते थे उसको। या आज से पहले ये हुआ करती थी, ये खुद ब्रिज भूषण ने करा था। फिर जो हरियाणा की 2 टीम नेशनल लड़ा करती, आज वो भी खत्म कर दी।
अच्छा, एक आखिरी सवाल मैं आपसे ये भी पूछना चाहती हूँ कि प्लेयर्स की आज स्पोर्ट्स सेक्रेटरी से बात हुई, स्पोर्ट्स मिनिस्ट्री से एक तरह से बात हुई है, तो वो संतुष्ट क्यों नहीं है उस मीटिंग के बाद?
देखिए जो उसमें कोई बात नहीं हुई ने, कोई खास कोई चर्चा नहीं हुई ने। क्यों जो साईं के जो अफसर थे साईं के बैठे थे, खेल मंत्री का कोई आदमी नहीं था, खेल मंत्रालय का, लेकिन खेल मंत्रालय 9 बजे का टाइम दिया, उसके बाद में चर्चा होगी।
प्लेयर्स ये भी कह रहे हैं कि सिर्फ बृजभूषण चले जाए उससे काफी नहीं होगा, वो चाह रहे हैं कि पूरा सिस्टम बदले। जो रेसलिंग जिस तरह से चलाई जा रही है देश में, वो पूरा सिस्टम बदले, फेडरेशन को पूरी नई तरह से खड़ा किया जाए।
ऐसा है पूरा फेडरेशन के मैं नहीं कह सकता, लेकिन मैं तो जो सेक्रेटरी है, जो प्रधान है, जो ब्रज भूषण है, 2-4 कोच हैं, जो एक मंडली है, ये जो माफिया मंडली है, इसको खत्म किया जाएगा।
ओके, आप कह रहे हैं कुछ लोगों की माफिया है, उसको खत्म करने की जरूरत है। महावीर फोगट, थैंक्स अ लॉट फॉर स्पीकिंग टू अस। लेट्स ओपन दिस अप टू द रेस्ट ऑफ आवर गेस्ट्स आल्सो जॉइनिंग अस। I'm joined by G. Rajaraman, sports writer, someone who's worked very closely with the Sports Authority of India as well. Harpal Singh Bedi is senior sports journalist in India. Balwant Phogat is member of the Khap Panchayat that has also issued an ultimatum that Brij Bhushan needs to go. Advocate Mahima Singh is from the Congress party. They have mounted pressure on the BJP to take action in this regard because the member concerned, the president concerned, is indeed a BJP member. But I want to begin on the sports aspect first. Harpal Singh Bedi, I want to understand from you, do you think Brij Bhushan will resign? There is a meeting that is now scheduled for January 22 of the WFI. Do you think he's the kind of person who will resign, or can he be made to resign?
Hello. See, you are asking me a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The question is, if this is a mob mentality now. Now, suddenly you file a case or launch an allegation and demand an immediate resignation of a man. If this is the way, then everybody in this institution or all the sports association will have to resign, because no player is happy with the federation. It is not only wrestling. And you don't know the history of wrestling federation, because everybody is just jumping, unprecedented, nothing. If you remember, there was one chap called V.C. Shukla, all-powerful man, information and broadcasting minister during Mrs. Gandhi's time. He was the president of Wrestling Federation of India, and he was virtually stripped of his clothes in the stadium. Now, the problem here is, for the first time, the wrestlers, there is a lot of discussion, wrestlers on the street. Now, what used to happen earlier, that wrestlers used to beat up the officials in the stadium. Now, instead of beating the officials in the stadium, they are on the street, simple as that. So the question here is two things. If this is a sexual exploitation, then there is no compromise on that. Then there should be an inquiry
a
into
complaint.
the whole issue.
A complaint and
If
a legal
that is
case.
Sexual exploitation. And the whole thing, the temperature has risen because Vinesh Phogat cried and said sexual exploitation. And there is no compromise on it. You know that. But
no, fair enough. I'm not saying that resignation will solve the charge of sexual exploitation. Absolutely not. But someone has to come forward and file a complaint. And I think Vinesh has indicated today that 4 or 5 girls will indeed come forward and lodge a complaint. We'll wait and see what happens. What I'm trying
they should do it.
They should do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. But what you are saying is that in the interim, Mr. Bedi, if I get you right, you are saying in the interim, it is unfair to ask for Mr. Bhushan's position. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. I stand by that, because every official in this system is condemned. And we live in a most corrupt society, which we are part of it. So you cannot blame that only the sports officials are corrupt. The bureaucrats are corrupt, politicians are corrupt, we are corrupt.
But sir, so that's not a defense for what Brij Bhushan is being accused for, right? That everybody is corrupt is not a defense for him.
I'm no advocate for Brij Bhushan. He may be a criminal or he may be not. The question is, you cannot just level an allegation against anybody.
Okay, fair enough.
Suppose if a murderer also gets a chance. Now, you cannot say, we just want to ask him to get out. Remember one thing, unfortunately, fortunately, it's becoming Haryana versus rest. That is the problem.
So you agree to that?
Versus the rest.
So you are saying this is indeed that. I asked Mahavir Phogat that question. That is there something else going on here? Is this a turf war? Is this Haryana versus rest?
It is at the moment. Now, why? Let me tell you, I'm nobody that Brij Bhushan should be consigned to dustbin. I'm not bothered about it. But if this is the way, then everybody will be consigned.
Okay, you're saying the manner in which his head is being called for is unfair. Okay, you're saying the manner in which he's being asked to be removed is unfair.
You cannot remove just because, you see, everybody is now coming. The Mahila Sangatans are coming, the lawyers are coming, everybody is coming because they want a TV time. They don't have no idea.
Okay,
if the girls
fair
have
enough.
been
This is
exploited,
which
they
is
should
why
go to the police. They should go to the police, file a case, FIR, and then demand an inquiry.
Sir, I get you, which is why I have noted eminent journalists like yourself, who I have seen cover the sport for far longer than me. G. Rajaraman is here to get your perspective on this, because I have seen some of the issues crop up between the federations and the players in the past too. G. Rajaraman, would it be fair to say, Mr. Bedi is being very frank, but would it be fair to say that there are no black and whites here? There are indeed shades of grey.
I think that is what life is, Shivani. There are no blacks and whites. There are plenty of shades of grey. And I don't think it's fair on our part to sit in judgment and say whether somebody should resign, whether somebody should step down while an inquiry is happening. We'll have to see what is the scale of inquiry and who's doing the inquiry. If it is a criminal inquiry that is being launched, if there is a charge sheet that is being filed, then I think Mr. Brij Bhushan Singh, it will be fair to ask him to step aside. It happened in Dr. Narendra Batra's case. He was asked to step aside because there was a CBI case against him and there was a charge sheet that was framed. Now, until that happens, I think we'll have to wait for what really transpires, whether the wrestlers actually go to the police, whether they go to even the National Commission for Women.
Yeah.
There are so many avenues open to them. Yes, Janpath is one great idea. You get public sympathy. But if you want action, you need to do it in a better place. And that could be the Sports Ministry, that could be the Sports Authority of India, that could be the National Commission for Women, or it could be simply the cops. You need to go somewhere and
that's when we are focusing only on the sexual assault charges, right? But there is a larger revolt that they are mounting, G. Rajaraman. Now, we discussed this yesterday when you were on this show, and I think a lot of people don't understand, because the clamor is that why is the government not acting? The finer aspect of this is that the government cannot intervene in an Olympics federation or the body. It cannot just remove willy-nilly, if something like this comes up, an elected president. So I want you to explain for our viewers. From what I understand, I spoke to a senior vice president of the federation today. A general body meeting has to be called. The general body has to vote out the elected president. They have to prove a majority. They have to have 2/3 of their members in the house and vote against an elected president. That's the only way, or is there any other way?
I think that is the best way to do, is to get a vote of no confidence on the floor of the House, where all the state associations come together and do a special general body meeting. But if that doesn't happen, yes, the government can intervene. It has intervened in a couple of federations before. It has got the court to intervene. We saw what happened in the Table Tennis Federation of India. So there are plenty of avenues for athletes. The courts will always stand up for them. We have seen in several other federation cases where the courts have stood up for the athletes and they have set aside some of the election of the office bearers. Now, Brij Bhushan Singh has completed 12 years. His term is up. He can't be president anymore. So asking for his removal is actually fait accompli. He's going to go out in any case sooner than later.
Yeah, but the issue is that here the action that the government can take, unless they kind of convince him and give him an ultimatum behind the scenes and say, you go now. Barring that, the only action that they can take is that they can suspend the entire federation, which I don't think that they would like to do. This is an Asian Games year. You've got Olympics coming up, and they wouldn't like to meddle either, because then an international suspension can be invited, right? Am I right?
Absolutely. They will be wary of that. Government will be wary of inviting a suspension of the Wrestling Federation of India by the International Wrestling Federation. The IOC will probably be watching what is happening in India at this point of time. But I really believe that if you want a solution, people need to sit on the table and discuss. If the ministry was keen on finding a solution, my own take, I no longer work with the Sports Authority of India. My own take as a sport journalist is that they should have got the athletes get back to the camp. That is the safest place for them.
But they've
get no coaches there.
They've suspended that camp, which was about to happen.
That is what I'm saying, Shivani. They should have had the camp. They should have asked the athletes to come back. Pending investigation, ask them what their complaint is. At this point of time, they only have media interaction. I don't think there is anything in writing with the ministry yet. So they needed to investigate, get the athletes under one roof, and the safest place for them would be the Sports Authority of India in Lucknow. Don't have the coaches there for a week, 10 days until the case is resolved, and then you decide which coaches to appoint there. Instead of that, they have been left in the cold. I really wish the ministry and the IOA both had stood up for the athletes at this point of time and not left them to their devices.
I'll come back to our guests in just a bit. Geeta Phogat is also joining us. She's also a noted Indian wrestler. Geeta Phogat, आपने आज ट्वीट किया था, आपने बोला कि हर इंडियन की जिम्मेदारी बनती है कि इस वक्त में जो प्लेयर्स लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं उनके साथ खड़े रहें। आप क्या मानते हैं जो चार्जेस उन्होंने लगाए हैं, क्या वो चार्जेस सब रेसलर्स के बिहाफ पे वो लगा रहे हैं जो बैठे हैं धरने पे?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल शिवानी जी, मैं कहना चाहती हूँ कि उनमें जो उन्होंने चार्जेस लगाए हैं और जो वो बोल रहे हैं वो 100% सच है, उसमें कुछ भी झूठ नहीं है। आप ये देखिए, हमारी बहन जो मतलब वहाँ पे देश का मीडिया बैठा हुआ है, वो इतने बड़े मंच के ऊपर वो मतलब पूरे देश के सामने वो मतलब उनके जो अंदर जो तकलीफ है, तो वो आंखों में से उनको झलकी है कि कितनी मतलब कितनी तकलीफों को सामना करना पड़ता है खिलाड़ियों को। और मैं एक बात और भी कहना चाहती हूँ कि आज हमारे जो खिलाड़ियों ने जो ये मांग उठाई है, ये एक बहुत ही हिम्मत का काम है। इतना आसान काम नहीं है इतने बड़े सिस्टम खिलाफ बोलना, और मुझे गर्व है हमारे खिलाड़ियों के ऊपर कि आज वो इस सच को देश के सामने लेकर के आए हैं।
गीता जी, मैं आपसे जानना चाहती हूँ, आपने बहुत साल रेसलिंग की, तो ये जो सेक्सुअल एक्सप्लॉयटेशन की बात कर रहे हैं स्पेशली लखनऊ के कैंप में, और ये भी कहा है प्लेयर्स ने क्योंकि वो ब्रिजभूषण के घर के पास कैंप है इसलिए वहां लगाते हैं और वहां पे एक्सप्लॉयटेशन होता है। आप कुछ शेयर करना चाहेंगे इस मामले में?
देखिए शिवानी जी, हम कैंपों में रहे हैं और हमने कई बार हमने इन चीजों को महसूस भी किया है, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम यही होती थी कि हम अगर एक कोई बोले तो ये लगता था कि हम बोलेंगे तो सुनेगा नहीं, कोई बोले या ना बोले, तो बहुत सारी चीजें थी। तो बहुत सारी चीजें थी, हमें लगा कि अगर पूरी टीम एक साथ, अगर जैसे आज सभी के सभी खिलाड़ी मतलब आप बोलेंगे कि पूरे सब टॉप परफॉर्मर इंडिया के आज एक साथ आए हैं, तो सबसे बड़ी बात यही है कि सबका एक साथ आना ये
वो
छोटी बात नहीं है, ये बहुत बड़ी बात है, वो सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी था।
अच्छा, एक और सवाल मैं आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ कि कुछ काउंटर चार्जेस बृजभूषण जी ने लगाए हैं कि ये प्लेयर्स अपनी मनमानी करते हैं, उनको सारे प्लेयर्स का देखना होता है जो पूरे देश से आते हैं, जो यंगर प्लेयर्स उभर के आ रहे हैं, वो किसी एस्टैब्लिश्ड प्लेयर को फेवर नहीं कर सकते, चाहे वो नेशनल का मामला हो या ट्रायल का मामला हो।
मुझे नहीं लगता कि उनके जो क्रिया है ये कहीं 1% भी ठीक है, क्योंकि आप किन एथलीट की बात कर रहे हैं, आपके चाहे वो फीमेल हो चाहे मेल हो, सारे के सारे आपके खिलाफ आपके बैठे हुए हैं, तो आप किस एथलीट की बात कर रहे हैं, किस रेसलर की बात कर रहे हैं कि आप सपोर्ट करते हैं, किन की आप बात कर रहे हैं? आपकी जो देश की, आपके जो रेसलिंग की जो क्रीम वहाँ पे बैठी हुई पूरे के पूरे खिलाड़ी, तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि ये कुछ निर्धार उन्होंने कुछ प्रतिक्रिया दी है।
ओके, Geeta Phogat, I appreciate you joining us and sharing your views. Let me bring in some of our other panelists who are also joining us. I want to go across to Mr. Phogat, Balwant Phogat, who's from the Khap Panchayat from Dadri. बलवंत जी, आपने भी बोला है कि जो सारी डिमांड है वो लड़कियों की पूरी होनी चाहिए, वरना आप क्या करेंगे, आपका अगला स्टेप क्या होगा?
देखो शिवानी जी, सबसे पहले तो आपको नमस्कार जी। आज जैसे हमारी जो खापों की पंचायत हुई थी दादरी जिले की, उस पंचायत में हमने जैसे सभी खापों की तरफ से एक मांग की है कि जो भारतीय कुश्ती संघ के जो अध्यक्ष हैं, इनको तुरंत प्रभाव से पदमुक्त किया जाए सबसे पहले। हेलो, हाँ जी, आपकी आवाज आ रही है। उनको सबसे पहले पदमुक्त किया जाए, क्योंकि जब तक ये पद पे बने रहेंगे निष्पक्ष जात की उम्मीद भी कम है कि न्याय मिल जाए। तो सबसे पहले सरकार को इनको पदमुक्त करना चाहिए। उसके बाद कोई सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जज हैं, उनसे इसकी जांच होनी चाहिए। अच्छा। और एक बात, जैसे हमारे जो सम्मानित ओलंपिक में जो गोल्ड मेडलिस्ट प्लेयर बैठे हैं, जिन्होंने पूरे भारत देश का नाम रोशन किया है, हमारा तिरंगा लहराया है पूरे संसार के अंदर, तो आज मैडम आप ये देखो इनके साथ कितनी जाती हो रही है। इतने बड़े प्लेयर, और जो भारत का मुख्य स्थान है जंतर मंतर, वहां पे बैठने को ये मजबूर हुए हैं, तो कोई ना कोई तो बात है ही जिसके लिए मजबूर हुए हैं, उसके ऊपर सरकार ने भी जल्द से जल्द संज्ञान लेना चाहिए।
जी, उनकी स्पोर्ट्स मिनिस्ट्री के साथ आज मीटिंग हुई है, लेकिन ये मामला ऐसा है जो हमारे एक्सपर्ट्स भी बोल रहे हैं कि इमीडिएटली कोई एक्शन नहीं आ सकता, एक प्रोसेस होगा, उसके बाद ही एक्शन आ सकता है. लेट मी टेक दैट क्वेश्चन टू एडवोकेट महिमा सिंह ऑल्सो. You've heard all of our panelists, Mahima Singh, and you know a lot of people who've covered sport, who covered sports for a living and have done it for 30-40 years. You know, they have a different sense when such things happen than, you know, perhaps the rest of the media. And I'm one of those who've covered sports in my life. We cannot just sack people because an allegation has been made is what they're contending in public. There has to be a process. The ministry has given time to the federation to respond, and the person concerned must also get to present his view.
Good evening, Shivani, and good evening all. Yes, you're right. One cannot be sacked just like that. But when there is something like this, the WFA president slapping a wrestler just because he asked a question, and this is a couple of years ago, this is not anything recent, and still he continues on the post for, you know, he's overboard in his tenure actually, and yet he continues to be there. Then the questions need to be asked. While our prime minister is busy beating drums in Kalaburgi, our players are sitting there on Jantar Mantar and they're asking whether the prime minister or the home minister will speak to them. There's no tweet, there is not even a single word that has come out from the Prime Minister or the Home Minister against the alleged dictatorial ways. It's not only the sexual harassment that they're alleging of. They're also alleging of the dictatorial ways of this chief. And you know, the video that I just flashed on your screen, which I believe that, you know, should have been a part of the report, that's my personal view, that it should, wherever this whole incident is being reported, this video is inevitable to the report because you know, dictatorial ways are very visible in this video. There is no way you can slap a player on the stage like that just because they asked a question. And then it's a matter of a fact that the national camp happens at Lucknow. Isn't it a matter of fact?
Yeah.
And is it just a coincidence that the home of the WFI president happens to be in Lucknow itself, and he's a 6-time MP there? And the solitary incidents on top of that, Shivani. We have seen couple of months ago in Haryana. You know, it's not even a month completed since that incident. The sports minister of Haryana alleged of sexual harassment, and thereafter the coach, the woman coach who had alleged, was immediately transferred from Panchkula to Jind. Jind is a remote district of the state. Which is why Vinesh Phogat and Sakshi Malik have categorically said that we will not divulge any details here. We will only divulge any details to the probing authorities as and when they are formed.
Yeah, because they want to protect the future of the victims, the alleged victims here, and I get that. But fundamentally, an action on sexual abuse can only be taken legally. I mean, even removing Brij Bhushan is not enough for that. That's too serious a charge to just deal with taking his position, is what I think all of us agree on. There's no disagreement on that. There must be a proper legal inquiry. For that, a victim has to come forward.
I have just cited Sandeep Singh's case, wherein another appalling fact is that Sandeep Singh actually came out and said, I'm handing over my portfolio to the CM. I mean, that's new to the ways of governance in this country. You can resign, but you cannot hand over your,
no, so he's divulged his sports portfolio, right? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, no, but see, he's still continued to be a minister for the other side, and the CM in Haryana.
No, I don't want to get into that because frankly, we're not discussing that. We're discussing the issue we're discussing, but you know, I don't want to get into the politics of this. Yes, both of these are BJP members here and ministers you're talking about, but let's just stay away from the politics.
Please allow me to complete this.
Yeah.
I have patiently waited. There is a very strong political aspect to this whole issue because the WFI president happens to be a BJP MP, a 6-term MP, one of which was with Samajwadi Party, but 5 terms he has had with the BJP, and BJP's record of tainted MPs is unknown to the citizens of this country.
Okay, I don't have a BJP representative to respond to you, but I take your point, and of course the opposition parties, all of them have mounted this allegation that something needs to be done, some action needs to be taken. But you know, my attempt was also to show why, if no action has happened so far, why is that? We need to understand that as well. I want to run, ma'am please, I'm running out of time, please. I also want to run a quick excerpt of what Vinesh Phogat said today, because you know, fundamentally I'm discussing the athletes today. and what is going on in the federation and the way the sport is being run. So, and understanding their grouses. So, let's listen to what Vinesh Phogat said. She did say today to the media that we are not going to play the nationals, we are going to directly play the Olympics. Let's play that out.
पर कोई नहीं खेलेगा, जितने आ रहे हैं कोई नेशनल नहीं खेलेगा। खिलाड़ी सारे सीधे ओलंपिक्स में जाने को तैयार हैं। हरियाणा कुश्ती संघ जैसे ब्रिज भूषण सिंह जी हैं, वैसी ही हरियाणा की फेडरेशन बना दी गई है। जो नई फेडरेशन बनाई गई है वो उनके ही जैसे लोग हैं।
Okay, Rajaraman, again, I come to you to just try and understand. You know, we know there's a history of a clash between Vinesh and the Wrestling Federation, although they let her off with a warning after a provisional suspension because of what transpired in the Tokyo Olympics, and there was gross indiscipline that came out against her. Whatever the reasons may have been, it is a past episode. When Vinesh, for example, today says that we're not going to play the nationals, we want to be selected to the Olympics directly, is that fair?
I don't think that is right at all. No athlete can ask for a place in the Olympic Games. There is the Asian Games this year. Had she spoken about the Asian Games, we might have understood. But you can't block a place for the Olympic Games, which is next year. Now, you look at other sport, Shivani, and I think the viewers will understand what I'm trying to say here. Shooting, for example, you could be a world #1, but you have to go back to the trials. And shooting has trials every 3 months or every 4 months. Before a World Cup, they pick teams for 2 international events. Then you come back to the trials. You look at athletics, it has got a set of people in the national camp. There will be trials, you have to perform in the national championship, and then you are selected. You look at boxing, unless you are part of the national team, unless you're part of the national camp, and you compete in the national championship, you can't get there. So I don't think this sense of entitlement is right. I feel for Vinesh, she's one of the finest wrestlers we've had, but you have to be part of the system. I remember 2 athletes going to the Supreme Court in 2018, Chavi and Prachi. Both of them complained that they were better than the relay team that was chosen by the Athletic Federation of India. They were told by the Supreme Court that the Federation has got the right to select. Now, if you have an issue with selection policy, like Manika Batra did, please go and complain to the High Court, Delhi High Court. You will get judgment there. You will get a favorable judgment. You have to
present your side, and every side has to be listened to. All right. My attempt is to just kind of understand what these charges are, apart from the the hysteria that has gotten built around what has happened. But in no way should the concerns that the athletes are raising be not taken with utmost seriously. I seriously do hope that we have a response from the WFI in time, and then the sports ministry looks at it and see what can be done. They cannot maybe directly do anything, but the IOA, actually, Mr. Rajaraman, I wanted to ask you this. What I have found astounding in all of this is I've tried multiple people today. I've called everyone, virtually everyone, the newly elected IOA, which is now led by an athlete of the repute of PT Usha. It has so many other athletes in the body. The Athletes Commission, right, which is led by Mary Kom, Sharat Kamal, and so many others. Maybe they had a program where they were busy today, but literally nobody has spoken. That silence is also problematic.
It is very deafening, Shivani. The silence from IOA. You have taken over only recently. I understand you are a new executive. But not even a single word in support of the athletes. I think this is the time the wrestlers need counseling, the wrestlers need support. We can't sit in judgment whether they are right or wrong. Let law takes its own course, and then let find out what the truth is. But they need support. They need emotional support, and this is where PT Usha, Gagan Narang, Kalyan Chaubey, Yogeshwar Dutt, who is in the executive committee of IOA, all of them have kept quiet, and that is very, very disappointing, to say the least.
All right. I'll end on that note. Let's see what happens. We'll track this story very carefully and closely. I do thank all of our guests for joining us. Moving on to the next big story we're discussing. British Broadcasting Corporation, which is the BBC, has released a documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Gujarat riots. This is a 2-part series called India, the Modi Question. The first episode of the series has been released. This pertains to the Gujarat riots and then Chief Minister Narendra Modi. Now, the film has come under question for showing Modi as guilty of the riots by virtue of a UK report. The Indian MEA has all now slammed the series, calling it a propaganda piece designed to push a discredited narrative. Remember, topmost court of India, that is the Supreme Court, had given a clean chit to Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the 2002 riots case, a case that ran for 20 years.
Do note that this has not been screened in India, so I am only going to comment on the context of what I have heard about or have my colleagues have seen. Let me just make it very clear. We think this is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative. The bias, a lack of objectivity, and frankly a continuing colonial mindset is blatantly visible. If anything, this film or documentary is a reflection on the agency and individuals that are peddling this narrative again. It makes us wonder whether about the purpose of this exercise and the agenda behind it. And frankly, we do not wish to dignify such efforts.
Now, what has also happened is that new UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who is of course of Indian origin, snubbed a Pak origin MP in UK Parliament when this issue was raised. Listen.
Mr. Speaker, last night the BBC revealed the Foreign Office knew the extent of Narendra Modi's involvement in the Gujarat massacre that paved the way for the persecution of Muslims and other minorities we see in India today, with senior diplomats reporting that the massacre could not have taken place without a climate of impunity created by Modi, and that he was, in the FCO's own words, directly responsible for this violence. Given that hundreds were brutally killed and that families across India and the world, including here in the UK, are still without justice, does the Prime Minister agree with his diplomats in the Foreign Office that Modi was directly responsible? And just what more does the Foreign Office know of his involvement in this grave act of ethnic cleansing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
The question we asked today is this new documentary on Gujarat riots just an attempt to rehash an old charge that has been discredited? Ashok Sajjanhar is former diplomat joining us. Tushar Gupta is senior editor Swarajya magazine. Kapil Madan is political analyst. Ashok Sajjanhar, I want to come to you first and understand from you. Basically, the only new thing about this documentary that people are talking about is that there is an account by the then UK FS, Jack Straw, who has revealed that the British government at that time concluded that Narendra Modi proactively prevented the police from stopping the riots. Of course, it's a matter that has been legally looked at in India. But you've got the Indian Foreign Secretary of the time, Kanwal Sibal, also going on record on social media to say that this was the mischief by UK mission. They circulated a highly slanted court report to other envoys as well. How are we to look at a foreign government's report on what has happened in India?
I think highly undesirable, highly objectionable. The diplomats who work here, it is not their remit to go and investigate and to inquire. I think they are here to, fulfill their diplomatic responsibilities. So I would, and, also if you have to see, Shivani, that why is this issue being brought up after 20 years? Has there been some sort of a new evidence that has come that you're talking about? Even as far as, whatever the Foreign Secretary Jack Straw is talking about, I don't think that document is available in the public domain. So, no one can really comment on it as to how rigorous was the investigation. In any case, it is not, India is not a colony of the British that they can come and do investigation about what is happening. As you have said very correctly, the Supreme Court has gone into it, the whole issue, for 20 years, I think, and it has given a clean chit totally to the Prime Minister. I think this particular report is, as the External Affairs Ministry official spokesperson has said. This is, absolutely untenable. To me, it gives, it is also made reference to something about, Article 370, which has been guaranteed. This was a temporary provision. So this is really indicative of low cost, low accuracy, low effort journalism by BBC. The only thing it is going to do is it is further going to damage the credibility of BBC. And at least as far as people in India are concerned, they are going to increasingly move away from its reporting.
Kapil Madan, it's not the first time that BBC is being accused of its very anti-India and in many times anti-Hindu slant as well. There are countless such occasions when this has been highlighted by people in India and also by people living in Britain itself. The whole thing sounds like you're just trying to rehash what has been a settled matter, because for a certain lobby, globally as well as in India, and for a certain segment, this is something that is their pet story, and that pet story is being revived despite the fact that there's been a legal battle through to the Supreme Court and adjudicated upon.
Now Shivani, we all know that in this particular matter the Supreme Court intervened and an SIT was formed. SIT gave its report, and thereafter the matter was heard by the Honorable Supreme Court, where the issue was whether there was any larger conspiracy that was hashed and senior government functionaries was involved or not. Now the Supreme Court has given its verdict, wherein Mr. Narendra Modi was given a clean sheet. But at the same time, we cannot lose sight of the fact that the genocide happened there. We cannot dispute the fact that riots happened there.
Nobody is disputing that. Who's disputing that there were riots there?
Now allow me to make my point here. Now the fact remains, we cannot lose sight of the fact, and nobody can dispute the fact that people lost their life in the Gujarat riots. Though the Honorable Supreme Court has given a clean sheet to Mr. Narendra Modi and said that there was no larger conspiracy, but the fact remains, if some documentary is being published which shows the genocide as it happened. Remember, Mr. Narendra Modi and the BJP government also publicly supported the Kashmir files that was also made on so-called factual, the factual incident that happened, the genocide that happened in Kashmir.
But there's a difference between a documentary and a film.
No one refuted the fact that the said fact happened. My only point
is, people did refute it. People till today refute that there was no genocide of Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir. No, but you're not, Kapil, you're not getting my point.
Looking at the documentary.
First of all, there's a difference between a documentary. I don't think he can hear me. Can you just lower his audio? I don't think he can hear me. First of all, there's a difference between a documentary and a film. Film is based on certain real events. The documentary cannot really use any creative license. It has to be what it is. But the fundamental question I'm asking is not whether the riots happened or whether the Kashmiri Hindu genocide happened. That's obviously undisputable, right? The question I'm asking is, if this is an attempt to somehow, Tushar, bring the repute of Narendra Modi globally down, somehow, puncture the image, somehow puncture his popularity in India and also globally. Because it is directly holding him responsible in some ways of the riots.
Spot on, Shivani. Absolutely spot on. Look at the timing of it. Just during the year when India has got the G20 presidency, suddenly out of nowhere, BBC curates a 2-episode series on the riots of 2002. Now, Kapil can do all his buts and howevers and whatsoevers, but the fact is that the Supreme Court of India has given a clean sheet. It has conducted its investigation, and it has also observed that there were some elements who were probably using the victims of the 2002 riots to peddle their own agenda. So let's not get into the intricacies of it, the legal ones, of course. But the bottom line is that the Prime Minister has been given a clean sheet a long time ago. The people of India have given him a clean sheet, more importantly. But Shivani, on a larger perspective, this is the same old narrative which is being peddled by the usual suspects. That this government is anti-minority, that this government is working against Muslim interests. And we are going to see a lot of it in the coming year until the 2024 elections. Because this is what they have. They will recall the 2002 riots. then it will be about the lack of work done for the Muslims. Someone will bring up the CA and NRC. The entire agenda of, peddling such documentaries or articles. We'll see a lot of articles also in the year ahead, from New York Times to Washington Post, that this government is somehow anti-minority. But I'll tell you, Shivani, what no one will talk about, that this government has done more for minority welfare, especially Muslims, in its first term than the Manmohan Singh government did in its second term, be it scholarship to Muslim students, be it minority welfare on a larger scale. But no one will talk about that.
No, but Tushar, I think it's unfair to bring that into this discussion, because whatever the government may have done now, we should single-mindedly focus on what happened in Gujarat. It doesn't matter what happened after or before that. Fundamentally, the question here is about the riots and whether there was any lackadaisical attitude by the government at that time to allow killings of either side, right? It's not just one side people who got killed.
We have seen the Prime Minister, or then he was the Chief Minister, being tried in the courts and by all investigation agencies for 2 decades. Now, are we supposed to believe that for 2 decades, the Foreign Secretary Jack Straw had some facts that he couldn't give to the public at large, that he was so concerned about the entire riots, about the entire unfortunate incidents that happened during those days in 2002.
Yeah, so that's the question.
While the case was going on, he was nowhere to be seen. The BBC was nowhere to be seen as a media house. And when the clean chit happens, sometime later, just before the elections, during the year of G20 presidency, suddenly they come up with
fair enough.
evidence.
I want to take a final comment from Ashok Sajjanhar as well. I just want to understand from you, the comment that Jack Straw has made and the comment that Kanwal Sibal is making. Kanwal Sibal is obviously privy to some knowledge that others may not be, because he was the foreign secretary at that time. When he says that this was slanted and there was mischief when it comes to this so-called report, UK sent its emissaries to Gujarat, etc., etc. I know that report has no value, but I want to understand from you, what do you think could be the axe that the UK could have had to grind to have a court-slanted report?
I think there can be a lot of speculation about that. What has been mentioned. One is the election coming up. The other is the G20. The other is, India's prestige is rising. India's prestige is growing. And you see whether it is the IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva, or it is the World Bank, or it is the UNDP. All of them have been heaping encomiums of praise as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned.
No, Mr. Sajjanhar, what I'm trying to understand is, back in 2002, what could have been the motivations of UK to paint him as the villain?
You see, basically, again, this is as far as the fight with the BJP is concerned, even in 2002, basically trying to rake up that issue. And I think they really did not get any much material, and that is why what Mr. Kanwal Sibal has also said, that he sort of, gave a rap on the knuckle of the British High Commission here, so that they don't spread disinformation amongst the European countries.
And if there was such great proof, I'm wondering why that proof never came out into public. Not that a UK...
For the last 20 years.
For the last 20 years. Not that the UK government would make something public. I don't know if there are some examples of that. Some leaks have happened where government positions have come to light. Not so sure about this. But I've run out of time. I leave it at that. Whether this is a larger propaganda, as the MEA says, and whether there is a greater design to basically just keep harping on the same thing when you've lost that battle legally, fair and square, after running it for 20 years. I slip into a very short break. On the other side, more news and updates.
आपने भूषण जी प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में ये जिक्र किया था कि आपने इसको पूरा एक साजिश बोला, कंस्पिरेसी बोला, और आपने ये भी बोला कि उसमें किसी बिजनेसमैन का हाथ है। कौन है वो बिजनेसमैन जिनके ऊपर आप आरोप लगा रहे हैं? आप ये मत कहिएगा आपके नाम नहीं लूंगा, क्योंकि आपका सीधा नाम लेके हमला किया जा रहा है।
नहीं, अभी हम कोई बिजनेसमैन खुल करके नहीं आया है, लेकिन साजिश है। ये साजिश के तहत हुआ है, क्योंकि 1 सप्ताह पहले तक इसी कमरे में बजरंग पूनिया बैठते थे। 1 सप्ताह पहले साक्षी मलिक यहाँ बैठी थी। 10-15 दिन पहले विनेश अपने पति के साथ बैठे थे। आज 10 दिन पहले, 7 दिन पहले कोई आरोप नहीं था। हमसे उनको कोई शिकायत नहीं थी। ये 1 हफ्ते के अंदर उनको शिकायत पैदा हुई। तो ये बिना कॉन्स्पिरेसी के नहीं है, बिना उसके नहीं है। और जब मुझे मुतमईन हो जाऊंगा किसका हाथ है, तो मीडिया के सामने जरूर बताऊंगा।
Joining me now is Olympic bronze medalist साक्षी मलिक। साक्षी, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए। ये बताइए, आप ये मतलब दुखद दिन है, बेहद दुखद दिन है कि हमारे ओलंपिक चैंपियंस दिल्ली के सड़कों पे बैठे हैं, जंतर मंतर पे बैठे हैं। आपके 2-3 मुद्दे क्या है जो फेडरेशन से आप चाहते हो? क्योंकि बृजभूषण जो फेडरेशन का प्रेसिडेंट है, उनका मानना ये है कि जो ट्रायल्स हैं इंटरनेशनल गेम्स के लिए, चाहे वो ओलंपिक्स हो, एशियन गेम्स हो, उसका ट्रायल्स बदला गया, इसके बदले में आप बैठे हैं और ये बेबुनियाद इल्जाम लगा रहे हैं आप लोग।
नहीं, ट्रायल्स का मेथड चेंज करने के एक छोटी सी चीज के लिए हमने यहाँ नहीं बैठे हैं। और रही बात ऐसा क्या इतना चेंज कर दिया जो मुझे समझ नहीं आया, विनेश को समझ नहीं आया, बजरंग को नहीं आया, हमें इतने साल कुश्ती खेलते हो गया, तो ऐसा किसी कंट्री में नहीं है कि बैक टू बैक कंपटीशन हो रहे हैं, वजन घटाना पड़ रहा है, फिर अगर अगला टूर्नामेंट खेल रहा है और वो नहीं खेले तो फिर उसे बैन कर दिया जा रहा है। तो ऐसा किसी भी कंट्री नहीं है, हम देश भर घूमे हैं। तो बस यही है। और भी बहुत सारे आरोप हैं जो हमने कॉन्फ्रेंस में भी बोला है कि स्पॉन्सरशिप नहीं जुड़ पाती है हमारे साथ, और स्पॉन्सरशिप जो जुड़ी थी एक टाटा मोटर्स, उसका पैसा अभी तक हमारे बच्चों के पास नहीं आया है। एक दो किश्तें दे के खत्म कर दिया है। कोई स्पॉन्सरशिप आएगी तो पहले फेडरेशन में जाएगी, फिर हमारे पास आएगी, जो कि बीच में ही रह जाती है और बीच में ही वो पैसा और सब खा लिया जाता है।
साक्षी,
तो ये आरोप है।
जो सबसे बड़ा आरोप, सबसे बड़ा इल्जाम जो आपने लगाया है ब्रिजभूषण के खिलाफ और WFI के खिलाफ कि मोलेस्टेशन हुआ है, सेक्सुअल हैरेसमेंट हुआ है, शोषण की गई है, तो उन्होंने उनके प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में आके बोला कि ऐसे एक भी लड़की हो जो सामने आके बोले कि मेरे साथ बदतमीजी की गई, तो ही सेड ना ही वो रिजाइन करेंगे, उन्होंने ये भी बोल दिया कि मुझे फांसी पे लटका दो। तो ऐसा आरोपी सामने आएगी और बोलेगी कि मेरे साथ ये हुआ है?
देखो, हम अभी तो नाम नहीं लेंगे, लेकिन हम बिल्कुल हमारे PM सर के पास जाएंगे और अमित शाह सर जी वो हमें बुलाएंगे और हम उनके पास जाके अपना बताएंगे। समय आने पर हम नाम भी लेंगे और सब कुछ खुल के भी बताएंगे।
आपने ये भी बोला था कि जो टीम एशियन गेम्स के लिए गई थी, जो टीम ओलंपिक्स के लिए गई थी टोक्यो में हाल ही में, उनके साथ भी ऐसा हैरेसमेंट हुआ था। हमें बोलिए कि क्या हुआ, क्या एग्जैक्टली हुआ वहां पे?
जैसे टोक्यो ओलंपिक में विनेश ने बताया, और वो बहुत मेंटली टॉर्चर हुई है जिसकी वजह से उसके परफॉर्मेंस पे इफेक्ट हुआ है, और उसका एक सिंगलेट के लिए उसे बैन करने की 2 साल उसे बैन कर दिया गया था, उसे मारने की धमकी दी गई थी। तो एक खिलाड़ी इतना बड़े लेवल पे खेलने जा रहा है और उसे धमकियां आ रही हैं, तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा गलत बात है।
ये बृजभूषण जो है, उन्होंने उनके प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में ये आरोप भी लगाया कि आपके पीछे कोई षड्यंत्र है, कोई बड़ा उद्योगपति है जो आपको भड़का रहे हैं ये सब चीजें बोलने के लिए और बाहर आके ऐसे सड़क में बैठने के लिए। इसके ऊपर आपका प्रतिक्रिया क्या है?
नहीं, कोई हमारे साथ कोई नहीं है, हम किसी पार्टी के साथ नहीं जुड़े हुए, हम किसी पार्टी को सपोर्ट नहीं कर रहे, बस हम रेसलिंग को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, हमारे आने वाली जनरेशन को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं कि जो प्रॉब्लम हमने फेस की वो आगे आने वाली जनरेशन फेस ना करे और एक अच्छा तरीके से फेडरेशन चल पाए।
और फाइनली आपने अभी आने वाले जनरेशन के बारे में जिक्र की, तो आज सुबह से आप लोग बैठे हैं, आपको क्या सपोर्ट मिला है, क्या फ़ोन कॉल्स आए हैं? यंग रेसलर्स जो हैं, जो आपको एक तरीके से आइडियलाइज करते हैं, उनके तरफ से कोई सपोर्ट मैसेजेस आए हैं सोशल मीडिया पे, फ़ोन पे?
बिल्कुल, सभी बोल रहे कि आपने हमें पहले क्यों नहीं बताया, हमें भी साथ चलना था। लेकिन ये था कि हम यहाँ हंगामा उतारने नहीं आए थे, हम यहाँ सिर्फ अपनी बात रखने आए थे और हमारा फेस है, इसीलिए हम आए हैं उनके लिए। और बाकी अगर रही बात और रेसलर्स की, तो हर रेसलर परेशान है, हर स्टेट का रेसलर परेशान है और सब लोग हमारे साथ हैं।
Alright, साक्षी मलिक, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए। But we also have an exclusive tic tac that's coming in with Brij Bhushan Singh. We're going to play that out right now here on Brass Tacks.
किया जा रहा है खिलाड़ियों के साथ।
नहीं, ये नहीं बोला। उन्होंने बोला है, उन्होंने चीफ कोच के बारे में बोला है, हमारे बारे में बोला है, लेकिन ये नहीं बोला है कि उनके साथ हुआ
जी, मतलब कि खिलाड़ियों के साथ हुआ है ऐसा,
और ये भी नहीं बताया है कि किसके साथ हुआ है, किस खिलाड़ी के साथ हुआ है। देखिए, कैंप में मैं बड़े ठंडे मन से कर रहा हूं कि कैंप में कम से कम 40 खिलाड़ी रहते हैं। और कभी कभी तो ऐसा हो जाता है कि 100 खिलाड़ी रहते हैं। अगर कैंप के अंदर कोई मिसबिहेव फेडरेशन के द्वारा होता है, मेरे द्वारा होता है या कोच के द्वारा होता है, तो कैंप का इंचार्ज साई का एक डिप्टी डायरेक्टर होता है, बड़ा अधिकारी होता है, वही सारी व्यवस्था को संभालता है। क्या 10 साल के अंदर एक भी एप्लीकेशन सेक्सुअल हरसमेंट की
Welcome back. Reliance Industries Chairman and Managing Director Mukesh Ambani's son, Anant Ambani, is getting engaged to Radhika Merchant. The ceremony is being held at Mukesh Ambani's residence in Mumbai at Antilia. Radhika Merchant is the daughter of Viren Merchant, the CEO of Encore Healthcare. She hails from Kutch, Gujarat. The couple hosted a Mehndi ceremony on Tuesday. The Roka ceremony of the couple was performed at Srinathji Temple in Rajasthan's Natwara on December 29, followed by a grand party at Antilia. In fact, let's go across to Antilia live, where my colleague Shilpa Ratnam is tracking the festivities and the ceremonies. Shilpa, give us a sense of what's happening now.
Well, first the family had come out for a photo opportunity. The entire family, including Mr. Mukesh Ambani, wife Neeta Ambani, along with the elder son Akash Ambani, his wife Shloka, and with his daughter Isha Ambani and her husband Anant Piramal, and you had Anant Ambani with his bride-to-be, that is Radhika Merchant. They all posed for a picture, and currently there is going to be a performance that's held at the ballroom. Before this, there was a puja that was conducted in the Vishnu garden. There's also a Krishna temple inside the premises, and the couple sought their blessings from there. The entire Ambani family also danced to Vaah Vaah Ramji, that song from Hum Aapke Hai Kaun. They all made speeches as well about how it is a blessed day and about the unique union of these two individuals. Anant Ambani and Radhika Merchant are reportedly childhood friends, and it is a union of these two families today, and the ring ceremony will be taking place shortly in the ballroom. And there's also going to be a performance by top Bollywood singer Shreya Ghoshal, who's already here.
Okay.
Other guests who are here include Sachin Tendulkar with a wife Anjali Tendulkar. We also saw the Thakres make their presence here. Kiran Rao is here as well, so is Rajkumar Hirani. So it is a star-studded guest list, and the ring ceremony is scheduled to take place just a short while from now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you exactly that. When is the ring ceremony taking place? Because I think that's the main ceremony that everybody will be looking forward to. You gave us a little bit of sense of the who's who, or not just of Mumbai, but of the country who are attending the gathering. Any more names, Shilpa?
Well, in fact, my colleague Mihir Trivedi is also here, and he's been keeping a keen eye on the guest list. Mihir, so far, who have we seen in attendance at Antilia?
Absolutely. From outside, of course, I have seen the Thakres enter. Rashmi Thakre and Aditya Thakre did go inside. We have seen Shreya Ghoshal come out and give a photo opportunity. We know that Rajkumar Hirani is inside. Kiran Rao was here some time back. And, you know, as far as the Ambanis are concerned, they are friends with the who's who of the Hindi film industry. I won't be surprised if the Bachchans are also inside. We know that Shah Rukh Khan is somebody who's close to the Ambanis. We also know that Hrithik Roshan, Deepika Padukone, Ranveer Singh have been present previously at 4 occasions of the Ambanis. I cannot get my head over the visuals of Javed Akhtar and Shabana Azmi dancing at the pre-wedding ceremony of Isha Ambani. So, you know, many from the Hindi film industry and different walks of or different industries will be present, including some big wigs from the political fraternity as well.
Well, yes, indeed, and more guests are expected as the ring ceremony is scheduled to take place just a short while from now. Currently, the guests are all assembling in the ballroom, where that performance, that much-awaited performance by Shreya Ghoshal will be underway very soon.
All right, Shilpa and Mihir, thanks a lot for bringing us that live coverage. We'll, of course, keep coming back to you. Performances in store, also the all-important ring ceremony. For now, though, I take your leave. My colleague Anand is joining you with the right stand.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand, coming to you live from the Golden City. Yes, if you are Bharatiya, you should know which is the Golden City, ladies and gentlemen. It looks all festive behind me. That's just the hotel where we are staying. They've just decorated it and it looks like ki bhai piche kahin shaadi ho rahi hai. But that's not the case. Heartiest congratulations to Anant Ambani and Radhika Merchant, and we'll get you the latest of all that is happening with their engagement ceremony also through the course of this edition of The Right Stand. But we start with the big news first, the big story, and that's also the subject matter of our discussion and debate. There has always been, ladies and gentlemen, a narrative that has been set about Bharat, and especially Bharat under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The targeting, vilification and deliberate distortion of anything and everything that's been done by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the government led by him over the last 8 years has been a bone of contention, and it has irked a lot of Indian citizens. There are a lot of people who have said, why is the West running this editorial narrative? Is the West editorial? Why is this biased narrative being run? There have been many who have turned around and said, well, that's media there. There are people who are writing. And sometimes this bias has also often in the past been exposed. There are a lot who have said, let them say what they have to say. But if this propaganda was deliberate, if this propaganda was done with a devious intent, then shouldn't that be called out? Shouldn't those people who are sitting inside these institutions, which are supposed to be championing the fourth pillar of democracy, which are supposed to be putting out the story as it is, and if they are our people who are influencing the narrative with a deliberate devious intent, then shouldn't such people and such entities be called out? Oftentimes, many would want to say a lot of things, but they hang back because they would say that there could be ramifications if we were to go out and put ourselves out there calling these people out, because they are all backed by a certain amount of muscle, legally and otherwise. But what happened in the British Parliament has now allowed everybody to go out and call out those who have run an agenda against Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Modi-led Bharat. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has the popular vote of Bharat. It is not Modi's India. He's India's Modi, because it is India who's elected him twice over and with an overwhelming mandate, and more than 3 times, and with a phenomenal mandate this time from the state of Gujarat. So when there is a documentary that is put out by the BBC with a perhaps distorted narrative, which after a uproar is pulled out of selected platforms, then many would ask questions. And the person who snubbed someone, a Pakistan origin MP within the British Parliament who tried to needle, was none other than the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. There may be a lot of similarities, variances and convergences in terms of ideas between India and Britain, trade-wise, strategy-wise, otherwise, position-wise. But what Rishi Sunak said perhaps underlined that no more is this distorted narrative going to fly with leaders across the world. He stood there and snubbed Imtiaz Hussain, and he said, I do not agree with the characterization of the Prime Minister in that documentary. That's what he said. With that one line, ladies and gentlemen, has the British Prime Minister himself called out these narrative spinners, called out the BBC, which for his international wing, and I'll go to our guests to be corrected if I'm wrong, gets state funding. So, and are there others also who will now be called out? Now, is calling out enough, or is there a need to correct this aspect, that let's not run an agenda against somebody or a nation under the leadership of somebody at the behest of others? Of course, there were politicians from the opposition who jumped at the opportunity, those who have been perennial Modi baiters, who jumped at the opportunity to push and peddle this entire documentary, but it was pulled down from select platforms. So without wasting time, let's just dive in straight across into this entire aspect of calling out this West Ed spin. We'll go to our guests, but first, let's listen and play out not just what the British Prime Minister said, but also what was the reaction of the MEA of Bharat.
Mr. Speaker, last night the BBC revealed the Foreign Office knew the extent of Narendra Modi's involvement in the Gujarat massacre that paved the way for the persecution of Muslims and other minorities we see in India today, with senior diplomats reporting that the massacre could not have taken place without a climate of impunity created by Modi, and that he was, in the FCO's own words, directly responsible for this violence. Given that hundreds were brutally killed and that families across India and the world, including here in the UK, are still without justice, does the Prime Minister agree with his diplomats in the Foreign Office that Modi was directly responsible? And just what more does the Foreign Office know of his involvement in this grave act of ethnic cleansing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
Do note that this has not been screened in India, so I am only going to comment on the context of what I have heard about or have my colleagues have seen. Let me just make it very clear. We think this is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative. The bias, a lack of objectivity, and frankly a continuing colonial mindset is blatantly visible. If anything, this film or documentary is a reflection on the agency and individuals that are peddling this narrative again. It makes us wonder whether about the purpose of this exercise and the agenda behind it, and frankly we do not wish to dignify such efforts.
Well, nobody wants to dignify such efforts, but such people are drawing state-funded salary. They are also running a particular agenda using a platform that is supposed to be the beacon of journalism, which is independent, free and fair. So then, if this journalism really free and fair, or is it purely agenda-driven? And then platforms which stand to be beacons across the world that set journalistic standards for the rest to follow, are they really following the standards themselves? Many would want to ask a lot of questions, but we'll focus on this agenda-driven journalism and especially this targeting and vilification of one leader and a nation led by this one leader. Adit Kothari, founder of the Indic Society, is with us. Abhi Yogi, founder Sanatan Sanstha of UK, is also with us. Abhishek Banerjee, columnist, with us. Pandit Satish K. Sharma, chair of the British Board of Dharmic Scholars, also with us this evening on The Right Stand, debate number one, or let's say the story and topic number one. Namaste, Jai Hind, and thank you very much for all of you gentlemen. All of you look very, very cozy where you are, and I am standing where it's just getting colder by the minute, ladies and gentlemen, but it's a beautiful part of Bharat that I am. So sometimes it's good to be up and about, and I'm up and about for a good cause. We'll unveil that through the course of the next few days here on our channel. But let's get to the issue at hand. And Pandit Satish K. Sharma ji, how frustrating has it been all this while, and that one line by the British Prime Minister has just undone perhaps the agenda that's been attempted over decades? Or is this not enough?
Anandji, Jai Shri Ram, and my sympathy. You look as though you're in Parliament Square, freezing like most of the people in Parliament Square today are, while we're warm. But thanks for the opportunity to have a chat. Anandji, it struck me that you and I are having many, many conversations, and that's an indication really of, I think, the fixation of the British politics and the British media with Bharat. Why on earth are members of the Indian diaspora in the UK and members of the Indian media having so many conversations? It is because there is a fixation, an obsession. It's almost as though the pillars of the British establishment, they're stalking the establishments and the government and the parliamentarians in Bharat. It's almost as though we have a jilted lover who is determined not to let go of a relationship that was an abusive relationship and has died a long time ago. The BBC, I think, is playing the role of the stalking, jilted lover here. But it's not about frustration, Anandji. It's actually something which I think is great to see. You know, the BBC has a reputation of being the global narrative setter. It used to create the narrative for peoples all across the globe. And one of the narratives that it had very successfully created was the narrative about itself as the arbiter of standards, of equality, of decency, of journalistic integrity. And that narrative has disappeared. We saw in Leicester how the British Broadcasting Corporation the BBC became what I'm going to name the GGC, the Global Gaslighting Corporation. Suddenly it transformed into an organization whose role was to gaslight the innocent while protecting those who were perpetrators of violence. And that's a good thing to see. The more people who recognize that the BBC is not necessarily a resource of good news, the better it is for everybody. The second thing I'd just like to say is that something important has emerged in Parliament, and I think it's wonderful that it has. And let's just be quite clear. It wasn't the British government which published this report, it was the Labour government which published this report. And I'm quite intrigued, and I will make inquiries on what basis did Jack Straw, the Labour government, the Home Secretary, feel he had the authority to send an investigative team to Bharat to conduct an investigation. I'm going to try and get a copy of that report, and it's just another indication of how inappropriate this is. But it's great that we're seeing the disappearance of these global narrative creators. You know, the last thing, which is a little bit of a tragedy, is that we're seeing the pillars of the British establishment pretty much at war with themselves. You know, the Labour Party is at war with the BBC is at war with the government, the church is at war with pretty much everybody. And it's a tragedy to see that this is a chaos that's emerging. And what they're trying to do, I think, is divert attention to affairs in Bharat, produce programs and documentaries which relate to a period in the last century. Why are they not focusing on Tony Blair and his destruction of 300,000 Iraqis? The Labour Party perhaps should be asked to ask the BBC to do that. So it's nothing other than sleight of hand. It's nothing other than the dirty tricks that the BBC does from time to time, as we saw in Leicester and as I think we're going to see more and more of.
Well, somewhere this agenda is not just driven by a personality or a person like Narendra Modi. There are viewers who are writing to me saying that the BBC has always carried agendas against nations which it has wanted it to be perceived in a particular way. So if it's not Modi and Hindutva now, it would have been something else before 2014, but somehow or the other continue to portray nations as they would like them to be seen so that they can control a particular narrative, and perhaps somewhere there are other editorial or journalistic organizations across the West who have followed that agenda. So that's also a suggestion. Since you mentioned this entire mission that was sent across at that point in time, Panditji, I just want to read out what the Foreign Secretary during that period, Kanwal Sibal, had to say at that time. Now, we're just putting out some of his comments. He said, "I'm aware of the mischief UK mission. UK had sent their diplomat to Gujarat. Highly slanted report was circulated to EU envoys, was informed of this by an EU envoy. Warned missions in Delhi to not interfere. I was Foreign Secretary during this period." That's what Kanwal Sibalji himself has quoted and said. So we'll put out his comments. But Adit Kothari, is this going to get organizations to draw the lines? Because the BBC is also the British Broadcasting Corporation. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Does its international wing not get funded by the state? Doesn't it come under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Britain?
It does, Anandji, and as the British Indian diaspora, I've been speaking to a number of members of our community, and I cannot tell you the level of outrage at this particular biased reporting has caused within our conscience, to the extent that there is a movement that people are running within our community to stop funding the BBC completely, because it so much so seems that they're actually using the monies taken from us to essentially run rabid and malicious campaigns against our own community, against our own civilizational values. I mean, what the BBC has been running for so many years has been an anti-India narrative, but since 2014, this has completely transcended into a different dimension, into a domain of Hindu misia and Hindu phobicness. We see this time and time again where they use Jai Shri Ram as a provocative call. They call Holi a filthy festival. It's evident that BBC have a slant of biasness towards Hindu and Indic civilizational values, and that is what they've been doing since 2014. Most importantly, I'd like to draw your attention to this particular broadcast, primarily because it wasn't released in India, and I believe there is a particular reason why it wasn't done so. It was only done for the local consumption, for the local public of Britain, and it was done so with a malicious intent by the left liberal academia in Britain and the left-leaning journalists in Britain to draw a parallel of Hindu fascism, and they've used Narendra Modi as the poster boy of that Hindu fascism, and they've tried to draw a parallel with the British Prime Minister, who calls himself a Hindu, who proudly wears his religion up his sleeve. They're trying to draw that parallel, and they're essentially going to use this to attack the leader of the Conservative Party. That's the way I essentially see it playing out from a British polity perspective. And, this is not going to just stop here. It's going to continue for the next 1.5, 2 years. Elections are, the general elections are due in India in 2024. And they are so, UK is also going to go into elections very soon. So this kind of rabid reportage is going to continue from various corners of the left-leaning intelligentsia, which do not see or feel very uncomfortable with leaders like Narendra Modi, who sort of do not identify themselves with the colonial collegiate system anymore, and essentially it makes them feel extremely uncomfortable.
The other thing is one would want these people to also be taken to the cleaners legally. Someone has to step up. If not, then India should sue them on the international courts or take them to court. Somebody should go ahead and not just punch holes in the misinformation and the propaganda, but make them bleed for it financially and also make them apologize on a global platform. They need to go back. We need to get to a system, Abhishek Banerjee, where nations will take such organizations to the cleaners and get them to apologize across all their platforms in big bold on their masthead. We are sorry, India, for putting out a slanted piece because we differ with you politically or ideologically.
Not sure where that leaves the BBC, because they are coming across as these rogue intellectuals who are probably embarrassing even the British government. And maybe they are really unhappy with the fact that, India has surpassed them and become the 5th largest economy. But there is really no shortage of reasons for the BBC to hate us. I mean, first of all, we are a former colony, so that jealousy angle is there. On top of that, there is a race angle. I mean, we are not a white majority country, and they are. Probably bothers them as well. And then on top of that, we are still a nation that, does not subscribe to any of the major Abrahamic religions in most part. That also probably bothers them. And then there are two actual remarks that I want to make. I mean, these intellectual classes, they try this false dichotomy between Hindu and Hindutva, and they'll say, you can say anything to Hindutva. I don't buy this narrative, because what is Hindutva? It's just political expression by Hindus. If you say that Hindus are the only group of people in the world who have no right to unite and give a political expression, then obviously you hate us. And the other thing is that they are desperately trying to, link all these fascism things. They are trying to link fascism to something in India. The truth is that the BBC should start reading some real history, and they'll find out that fascism is actually a church-backed movement for decades. So they should read up some real history and stop trying to find ghosts of fascism when none exist. They should look for it in their own Western civilization, because that's where it came from.
No, and Abhishek, the fact is that this doesn't stop with the BBC. There is a litany of instances where the rest of the West has also given this editorial spin. We'll put out all that information as I get your comment and take this forward with Adit and also Pandit Satish Sharma. Yes, Abhishek.
That it gets some amount of scrutiny. If you look at some other publications which are in like French or German or Spanish language, they are saying much worse things. If you see, there are Spanish language publications in South America which are using literal abuse words for our great freedom fighters like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. They're using the F word. And because they don't speak English, so they don't get as much scrutiny. So this is happening all around the world. The liberal elite is basically out to get us. They are worried that there is competition from serious, proud Hindus on the world stage. They can't stand that, and they are throwing a fit about it. And they know that in India they have lost the game. So they play the game only exclusively abroad.
No, but then these are the people who are also coming to India, Adit Kotari. So if they are busy trying to form an opinion, cloud the judgment and opinion of the people back in Europe and also across other countries across the world, then something needs to be done to correct this or this to be called out. Because then people will come with the perception. This is going to influence people who will get into places where decisions will be made, where calls will be made on business, trade, economics, at all levels, tourism.
Absolutely, and I completely concur that, it's high time that this, from a state infrastructure perspective, I think the Indian state needs to call out this kind of rabidness that has been projected for very long. I think it's high time we take them to the cleaners, as you mentioned, and we make them accountable for the kind of reportage that they've essentially produced. From a community perspective level, what we are trying to do as British Indians, we have written enormous number of letters to the BBC, essentially outlining that they've completely lost their objectivity with this particular broadcast, and it's completely a one-sided narrative, completely ignores and diminishes the Supreme Court of India's verdict and the SIT Commission, which was set up, which took a sitting chief minister and interviewed him for 6 to 8 hours, made the sitting chief minister go through a narco test, which was never heard of, never done in the previous history of India. And they've ignored all of those facts. They've ignored the fact that the sitting chief minister of Gujarat during the time of the 2002 riots had written to his neighboring states, which were Congress-ruled states, ruled by, Digvijay Singh was one of the chief ministers, and he had requested for police assistance, which was essentially denied at that time because they feared of a spillover of the riots into their particular states. So those are the kind of things that they've completely omitted from their reportage, and we have written to the BBC. Our next step is essentially going to be to write to the Ofcom and essentially outline our enrage and our complete dissatisfaction with how BBC has dealt with this issue.
No, they have also Pandit Satish Sharma totally ignored what the Supreme Court said while rejecting Zakia Jafri's charges against Narendra Modi and 60 other officials. And this was as of the 24th of June 2022, where they said inaction or failure of some officials or one section of state administration cannot be the basis to infer a pre-planned criminal conspiracy by the state government. Allegations of criminal conspiracy at the highest level cannot be inferred by simply linking the state's failures. A conspiracy can be alleged only if there is clear proof of meeting of minds to commit a crime. No fault can be found with the approach of the SIT in submitting the final report dated February 8, 2012, which is backed by firm logic, expositing analytical mind and dealing with all aspects objectively for discarding the allegations regarding larger criminal conspiracy at the highest level for causing and precipitating mass violence across the state against the minority community during the relevant period. This is what Justice Khanwilkar had also written, who authored this 452-page judgment for the bench. And this is part of the judgment. So if the BBC in its documentary has ignored the top court of our country in cases with 2002, is this not a legal ground to take them to court, to make an example? Somewhere, Panditji, one gets the understanding that you have to knock one person down, not just hit them, but to knock them out totally so that the rest back off.
Anandji, I agree entirely with what Shri Banerjee pointed out when he was identifying the very many reasons why the BBC and the British establishment should hate India and India's rising. Now, it's worth considering that we are seeing the long, painful death throes of a world order established out of white supremacy, Euro-Christian colonialism. And the prospect of an India with a $10 trillion economy, with an integrated national infrastructure, with communications between businesses and with academics, all indigenous, it's a frightening prospect for those people who still don't see the writing on the wall. And I would say that we shouldn't seek to gag the BBC. Every opportunity is an opportunity whereby they reveal their true colours on a daily basis. We are now seeing the smile being replaced with the fangs that have always been hidden just behind that rictus grin. And what we should be doing now is using every opportunity to break this global understanding that the BBC is reputable and reliable. It is not. Its purpose was to gaslight colonial populations and to conceal colonial crimes. Now, every agency and every nation which stands up and says, we're going to tell our own truth, is going to naturally reveal what the BBC has been doing for a long time and what was done by the British deep state. But one of the ways in which I think the British Hindu community, in addition to what Aditya has said, will respond with is as follows. You will see within the next month or so a huge number of British Hindus publicly destroying their licenses, refusing to pay this license tax. You know, it's a colonialist trick that the slaves must always pay for their own enslavement. You know, with the BBC, it's the slaves must always pay for their own gaslighting and their own conditioning. And so we will see a huge number of our own British Hindus joining many British people, indigenous people, in either shredding or burning their licenses very, very publicly. We will see a large number of our own community beginning to challenge at the highest levels with parliamentarians the fact that the BBC receives any state funding at all. But this is part of the decline of this colonial power. We are seeing its decay, and its decay can't happen soon enough. So it will be an exercise, I think, the Hindu community in Great Britain and the indigenous community in Bharat, everybody should join together to actually gag this corporation, but not by legal means. Let's have their offices in New Delhi closed down. Let's see the protests outside challenging this colonialist supremacist narrative. That will be newsworthy. And when that happens in New Delhi, what will happen is every single capital around the world will be watching it, and then the BBC will get a bloody nose.
Well, that's another way of looking at it, but there are others who are also watching the broadcast who feel that some amount of punitive action and a global apology needs to be made. One of them needs to be made to pay for what they are trying to do in terms of propaganda, because they're using money which is supposed to be for putting out the news without any bias, without any agenda, and to show a nation as it is, rather than use and give a platform to those who are paid for activists or paid for propagandists. So there are multiple points of view here, but thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast. I have to quickly move on. We've got a big update coming in on the face-off between wrestlers and the Wrestling Federation of India. Going across to that update that the Sports Minister Anurag Thakur, Youth Affairs and Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has said that they will take whatever steps are required to try and break this deadlock. And there is an update that he is likely to meet the players at 10 p.m. this evening.
तो यही कहूँगा, खिलाड़ियों ने जो आरोप लगाए वो गंभीर किस्म के हैं और उसका संज्ञान लेते हुए भारत सरकार ने, खेल मंत्रालय ने तुरंत कार्रवाई करते हुए रेसलिंग फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडिया को नोटिस भी दिया, 72 घंटे के अंदर जवाब भी मांगा है और इसके अलावा जो कैंप